You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan.
And I'm shy and retiring.
Yeah. So this is on the countdown of our time together, your second to last show.
Next to last.
Yeah. Now, what do you feel about that?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes me sad then, because I don't feel good.
I'm ready. You know, when you're ready, you're ready.
You're ready. Well, and I started, when we started this, the very
3
first
years
day,
ago.
yeah, I said to you, when
you're
ready to be done,
pull the plug.
Just let me know. And 3 years later, you're doing that. But again, I said this last time, but I'm just amazed and really blessed that you
I'm a slow learner.
have gone as long as
It's
you've
taken me
gone.
3 years to figure this out.
Yeah.
But I've got it.
But you got it.
Golly.
Yeah. So you did therapy for how many years?
35. I looking yesterday because my most recent license renewal came, and my first one was in June of 1988, which was the year that Missouri required licensure. I had been in practice for 3 years before that.
Wow.
Because I started in 1985 working at an outpatient clinic for St. John's Hospital and wasn't required to have a license. Mm-hmm. But when the state passed the licensure law, I took the test and got a license in the first year. I have one of the lowest active numbers of licensure in the state.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, it just means I'm old.
Well, but old or wise.
And experienced. Well, not wise. Experienced is a better word.
Why? I would say.
I don't know that wisdom is a thing that I could speak to.
Oh, I think there are a lot of people who would fight back on that.
I would hope so.
Yeah. And I've always said that the difference between knowledge and wisdom is time.
You've always said that.
Yeah, I do always say that.
Should we write that down somewhere?
Well, I think that should be in a book.
Yeah.
I should put that in a book.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't have any issue with, 18, 19, 20-year-olds or people who are on college campuses and they're talking about politics. I'm glad that they do those things, but I wouldn't say that makes them wise. I think you have to have a certain amount of life experience to be able to claim that, and I think you can do that.
What's that with? I can't remember the phrase because I'm so damn old.
Yeah.
Something with faint praise. But it'll come to me.
It'll come to you.
Yeah.
We'll get halfway through, and you'll just blurt it out, and I'll be like, "What's that?"
Because those filters are falling aside.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't have filters anymore. I'm old.
So, what percentage of responsibility would you put on the client for good therapy?
50.
Okay. Yeah, I would say it's at least 50. And so people go, and the reason that
I tell clients all the time, you may be smarter than I am, you may be richer than I am, you may know more than I know, and you can lie to me all that you want to, and we can play games with that. But it won't be helpful to you if you do.
Right.
You're wasting your time, my time, your time, and your money.
Exactly.
But if you will engage and face whatever you need to face, which sent you here or is bringing you here, I believe spending time with me will help make that better.
And the reason why I would say it's at least 50%, and I would actually say it's even more than 50%.
How much more?
I would say it's probably 70%.
Okay.
The client.
Right.
And the reason is because...
Does that let you off the hook?
As the client, no, but because the client is an individual. So there's only, they're them. They're just them.
Yeah.
There are a million therapists. So as a client, you can find a different therapist if the one you're going to isn't suiting your needs, but you can't find a different you. So if you're going to get something out of therapy and you think you're going to go and you're going to rely on the therapist to make that happen, you're going to be sorely disappointed because that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's
for
what life
exactly the
works.
reasons that
Right.
you laid out. But I think that there are a lot of people who go to therapy and they think, I'll go to therapy, I don't have to do anything. This person's some kind of a Svengali or a wizard, and they're going to make it happen, and I can be a passive participant. You cannot be a passive participant in your own therapy.
But a good therapist won't play that game.
Right.
And they'll sit there and say, why are you coming here? Why
Right.
are you sitting here? Although there are times, and I, as both a client and as a clinician, I have sat for an hour without speaking while somebody cried. Sometimes the words get in the way. The presence, the seen presence, is the value. And if I can sit with you, and I used to talk to this, I taught in training programs for therapists in universities for 30-something years. And I would regularly say, especially for women who wanted to become therapists, you have to be able to be in the presence of a physically rageful male. Not threatened in terms of physically threatening you, but you have to sit with that rage and that anger without rescuing them from it or distracting them from it. You have to let them feel it until it burns itself out and process it and teach them, where's this coming from? What's this doing to you? What can we do about it, if anything? Do you want to do something about it? Is it getting in the way in your life? But you have to be present for that and not run away from it. The same thing is true with despair and grief. I have to be able to sit in the presence of awful, horrendous grief and not rescue them from it and distract them from it, but let them feel it. But then have that safe holding environment where when they are depleted, we can start to put the pieces back together. So the importance of my contribution is my presence. I would say 50-50. I mean, they have to bring it to the table. They have to allow it to emerge. But when it does, I have to know how to embrace it.
Yeah. And I don't have a problem with the 50-50. I mean,
and I don't have a problem with 75. I mean, those are numbers that you pick out of a hat.
Right.
But the process is what matters to me.
Right. And I would even argue that, because you had said earlier that the words are not as important as the experience, I would argue the words, the only value of words in therapy is to elicit emotion. The emotion is what, I've always said this about therapy, the reason for therapy is because an individual is experiencing a breakdown in their emotional regulation. If you can nobody went to therapy because they had a bad thought. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because sometimes people come in with invasive thoughts. But generally, it's because you can't emotionally deal with the thought, right? And so if you can emotionally regulate, nobody goes to therapy. And when you can't emotionally regulate, the smallest problem can seem insurmountable. And so the words are a venue, an avenue to be able to get at the emotion, which is part of why I think cognitive behavior therapy, so you have cognitive, behavior, and emotion are the three parts of the human being, and that eliminates 33% of that equation. Albert Ellis's original theory was rational emotive therapy. And so it was all about this idea that there is a connection between what we think and how we feel that I think some people in cognitive therapy kind of lose out on, because it isn't convenient in a 3-session paradigm that we now have in insurance companies.
Well, that's driven by insurance companies and cost effectiveness for solving an identified problem. It's not therapy. I mean, if I want to teach you to not blow your nose in the presence of other people in the office, because that's going to cost you a job or a raise or all kinds of things, I can do that. And I can do that in so many sessions. But that's just an identified irritant that is an impediment in your life. It's not a pattern. And one of the things that I tell clients all the time is, well, we're looking for patterns. We're looking for patterns in the words you hear in your head. We're looking for patterns in the way that you find people in your life and populate your life. We're looking for patterns in terms of the choices that you make and the payoff that you get. But in the process of looking for those, it's like going up to an apartment building with 100 doors. We can go into any door. And if we go through the door successfully, we'll get to where we need to go. We may get to the end of the line and come back out and go in another door. But it's there. And it doesn't really matter where we start. We'll just start. And if you stay with me, we'll get where you need to go.
So if you were speaking directly to someone who maybe hasn't gone to therapy yet,
Yeah.
or has been to therapy but didn't feel like it was
Yeah.
very effective, what would you say they should do to try and facilitate the best possible therapeutic experience?
Well, first thing I would say is not every therapist is right for every client.
Yeah.
And I may not be right for you. What I would say is give me a chance. Come in and talk to me a couple of times, and I won't bill you for the first time or two, if that would be helpful to getting you in here. But if you come back the third or fourth time, then pay me for every time that you've been here, because I'm doing the work. But I'm willing to invest 2 or 3 sessions in you to see if you're willing to invest that in me.
Right.
And if it feels right for you, and if it doesn't, I mean, somebody may come into my office and get the creepy crawlies. It's
Yeah.
like, ooh, there's something about you that's just, and it may not, as a therapist, I have to understand that may not even be about me.
Right.
I could resemble their grandfather that abused them.
Right.
I could talk in a way that echoes in their past in some way that they don't even know about necessarily. But I could be setting off alarms like crazy. So then that individual, what I would say that individuals don't give up on finding help.
Right.
Go try another therapist, And when you go in with some questions. How do you do this work? What do you charge? What happens if this? What happens if that? I mean, it's like a job interview. But in the process of that, the skilled clinician will answer your questions, but also get you to start talking about why these things are a concern for you, and
Right.
what it is that you're looking for,
Right.
and where it hurts.
And when you were talking about somebody can come in and get
Yeah.
the creepy crawlies,
Oh, yeah.
that's probably almost universally the client. That's not about you.
I would hope so, but yeah, I could be,
And that's based on projection.
right.
And projection is...
But it could also be, I mean, especially if it's a trauma survivor with acute adaptive survival skills. I mean, they could be reading something that I'm not even necessarily aware of that's a trigger.
Right. But it's their trigger. I'm saying you're not doing anything. You're just being in the room.
Yeah.
And so you're not doing anything
hopefully.
that would realistically cause those things to happen, other than their projection is a part of a trigger. But psychoanalytic theory and psychodynamic therapy is all based on that projection. And so a lot of times, in the olden days, people would say, "Oh, if you don't want to come see me, that's your resistance. That means you should come and see me more."
Yeah.
And we don't subscribe to that belief. Now, we do believe that if the client comes in and they're feeling uncomfortable, that is a very likely a projection, and certainly that is fodder for the therapeutic process. But you also have to have the safe holding environment, which is a concept from humanism. But and so if that projection prohibits them.
So in training therapists, one of the things that I regularly would say is you can't do formula therapy. You need to learn the formulas,
Right.
so that you can pick and choose which elements seem to be appropriate as a way to help open the cantaloupe for some individual client. But you can't just adapt yourself to one school of thought and see everybody fits, one
Right.
size fits all.
Right.
We'll do cognitive behavioral for 6 sessions and life is going to be perfect for you, no matter who you are, no matter what your issues are. That's BS. That's not going to work. So you have to, but then today in the modern world, the term eclectic approach to therapy, which suggests, well, I can choose these different strategic styles, if whatever you're comfortable or most comfortable beginning this process with, we can start there.
Right.
Whether it's humanism, whether it's psychodynamic, whether it's whatever it might be. Fine.
And
I need to know that so that I can do that, but I'm not bound to that. And when the doors start to open, I'm going to encourage you to let them open.
Yeah, and when we train people who are looking to be therapists, one of the things that I always say to them is, I'm okay with you defining yourself as eclectic. You and I think, would both define ourselves as eclectic. And that's okay as long as you can define,
I would say,
what you mean by that.
eclectically successful.
Okay, say more.
I'm successful. I'm good at what I do.
And so what is that? What is?
I use different things with
Right.
different people for different reasons.
But you can
But I'm
define
very
why.
comfortable. Yeah.
And so if somebody says, "Oh, I'm eclectic," and that covers the fact
What
that
does
they
that
don't
mean?
actually have a
Yeah.
theoretical orientation, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That
I
is.
remember when I was in training, there was a guy in my class, and we were working with a supervisor in a practicum. And the first week we were there, he was assigned a couple of clients, and he came in for supervision. We were in a group, and we were all presenting the people that we'd seen and what we were understanding, what we were trying to do. And he was so proud of himself because he'd given homework assignments to all 3 or 4 of the people that he'd seen. And the supervisor looked at him and said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I gave them all something to do before they come back next week." And the supervisor said, "What'd you
Why?
tell them to do?"
Yeah.
I told them to go home and do the laundry. I told them to go home and I said, "What kind of laundry soap do you use?" And, "Oh, well, throw that out and go get this." And so that's their assignment. That was my reaction. Yeah.
Hopefully it was the professor's reaction also.
Yeah, it was. But this guy saw it as establishing his authority, his in-chargeness for doing the therapy to be able to give the client the right answer.
Yeah, yeah. And right, and that's not the goal.
But that was 37 years ago, I think.
And he's still practicing today.
Oh, no, he's dead now.
Oh.
He's practicing somewhere else.
Let's run to our break, and when we come back, we're going to take up a different topic.
All right.
Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.
Okay, we're back. And not really so much a different topic as one of the things that is in this article that will be with this podcast that I want to touch on is the idea of the theoretical orientation or approach. They call it the approach or style of therapy. How much of that do you think a client should be invested in? Because I've had people call me and say, "Hey, do you do cognitive behavior therapy? I need a cognitive behavior therapist."
Yeah.
I don't know where they got that idea. Probably somebody told them that, or probably the court told them
Possibly,
that,
yeah.
whatever. But how much of that do you think the client should be concerned about? Do you think a client should go and do some research on the internets and
No.
find a therapy style and then find a therapist that does that
No, I
style?
think they should find a therapist they feel comfortable with or reasonably comfortable with in the beginning. And the whole intellectualization, it's just like calling me and saying, "Are you a Christian therapist?" And I say, "Yes, I work with Christians every day." Mm-hmm. Well, that's not what I meant.
Right.
Well, tell me more about what you meant.
Right.
Why does that matter to you?
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? Well, I don't want you to corrupt my belief system. Okay, and how could I behave in a way that would or wouldn't do that? I mean, so you just peel the onion. You got to get them in the room, and then you start to peel the onion. And if you just give them the answer they're looking for, you aren't doing therapy.
Right, right. And I don't know where people get those ideas from. Just like I said, I suspect
Somebody
that
tells them.
Somebody
Yeah.
tells them. Right.
Or they read it in a book. I
Yeah.
read a story or news magazine or Psychology Today, and it says, "Oh, go to this kind of therapist if you have this issue. Can't sleep at night?
Exactly.
Go see this person."
Yeah, a hypnotist.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. To stop smoking. And
Yeah.
so, what you and I think, are saying, I think we're both saying the same thing, is that the approach what we would call theoretical orientation isn't necessarily important. What matters is the ability for the client to engage in a trusting relationship with that individual and be able to build a safe holding environment for emotional material that they need to explore.
Okay, so it's self-defense in some domains for us to say this, because neither of us, let me say it differently. The industry, the medical industry, the insurance industry are pushing in the direction of brief, short-term focused interventions, brief, short-term focused therapy for a specific identifiable problem. They're pushing that because it's cost containment. They're pushing it because they have contracts with major corporations that are called capitation contracts, where they have a set fund to see however many people that Xerox wants to send this year, and if Xerox doesn't send any, they still get all that money. So they want to reduce the number of visits by the number of people. The other thing they're pushing is to have AI, chat box therapy, where you just talk to a computer and it's scripted to say, well, tell me more about that. How do you feel about that? Oh, well, what I hear you saying is, and all the formulaic interventions. That's all in service of cost containment. So having said that, I would also say it's a market-driven economy. So I have to be able to give you a sense of worth and value when you come to see me. And so you come with a head full of expectations. This is going to be embarrassing. This is going to be awkward. This is going to be hard. This is going to be good. Oh, thank God I need this. And I know 3 people who have seen this guy, and he helped all of them, and so he's going to help me. Whatever they come to the table with, I have to open that door, make them feel comfortable with me, and invite them to start the process of laying their cards on the table. So I don't want to engage in a debate. I don't want to engage in self-justification. I don't want to give big explanations of theory. I just want to make a contact as a human being that is receptive and safe, so that you can start to talk to me about whatever you need to talk about. And it may not be what you think you need to talk about, what you think brought you here. My boss said if I don't come to therapy and deal with my anger issues, blah, 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 blah. So we may start with that, and we may explore that, but the odds are there's something else that's driving that bus. Because the presenting problem is almost never the underlying problem.
Right. And I think that what you just said is exactly the supportive argument for the third point, which is it is important to view the therapy as a collaborative process.
Yes.
So the client should never go into a therapy relationship thinking that the therapist is the one who is doing all the work.
Well, and the therapist has to know that the insurance company isn't driving the bus either. Now, they may say to you, we're not going to pay for this because we want you to do this treatment. Sensory deprivation tank, put them in one of those for an hour. Oh, no, I don't do that. Well, that's the only thing we're going to pay for. Then you have to say to the client, okay, I don't do that. Your insurance isn't going to pay for it, but I think you need this.
Right.
Can you find a way? Are you willing to pay for it?
Yeah.
And then you tell the insurance company, you know what, I don't work for you. I work for my client.
So in terms of the therapeutic relationship being a collaborative process, what can the therapist do to, now if the client comes in and they're just saying, oh, you do all the work. First off, what we train people in therapy classes to do is never work harder than the client. A therapist should never be working harder than the client and should never feel as though it's their responsibility for the client to change. It's the client's responsibility to change.
But alarms go off. I taught my students, you don't sit and do paperwork or take notes while your client is struggling with the silence. If they're sitting there trying to ground themselves or think of what they're willing to say or need to say or what have you, you need to be listening to their nonverbals. You need to be in contact with them. You need to be looking at them, not aggressively or challengingly, but safely, waiting for them to find the strength to say whatever they need to say. If you go off and do other things, then the message is, well, it's all their responsibility and it's their job. But the message is also, I'm not paying attention. This is not good. These are not good attending skills. So you have to have those skills. You have to have that knowledge. And I recommend to my students, don't take notes while the client's in the room. Now, the Board of Ethics for counselors is that you have to take notes after each session, and you have to have them written down within 24 hours of the session. So then we have to teach them about how to take notes and what kind of information to put in the notes and all of that. But you don't do it during the session. During the session, you pay attention to me, damn it. That's what I'm paying you for. So you don't write yourself memos. You don't write descriptions. You don't write a menu for tonight while you're waiting on me to stumble around. And especially when I get in a repetition cycle. Clients repeat stories. They repeat stories. They repeat stories. They repeat stories. They do that for a number of reasons. We have to figure out, why is this story so repetitive in your life? Why is this story the one we keep talking about? There's something unfinished about it that we need to find so that you can move beyond it, because it's blocking you. But I don't know what it is. Do you know?
So you would say then that the therapist's responsibility in that collaborative process is the practice of attending.
Yes.
That if the therapist doesn't demonstrate
accurate empathic listening, reflective listening.
And I think that that is a great point. If you're out there as a therapist and you take notes in session and that's the way you've been taught, or your institution
reconsider
requires
what you're doing.
it. I mean, yeah, I would encourage you to reconsider it. I'm not encouraging anybody to do something that goes against either their nature
or
what the policy is.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's like if you're a group therapist in a hospital and they assign you to run a group therapy discussion today on my troubles with my father, and you don't control the population that shows up in the group. The insurance company does. However many people are in the hospital this week who need therapy from 1 to 3 to at least occupy their bodies in a supervised space, they're going to send them. They're not all going to have that issue or be willing to talk about it or trust, and they're going to be at different places in their therapy. So if that's your job, you can be ethically offended by it and say, oh my God, it's a horrible way to work, but you get paid by doing it.
Right.
So if you don't like that, don't work there.
Yeah. But I think that the point that you made is so salient that because you will be trained as a therapist to take those notes while you're in session.
Yeah.
And if you do that and the client is aware that you're doing that, it can detract from their feeling of being seen and genuinely heard. And so just keep that in mind as a therapist, that your job is to create the safe holding environment. If you are doing things that are prohibiting your client from feeling like that safe holding environment is being created, that's counterproductive.
It also gives them an opportunity to look around your office and find ways to distract you. They'll see a book on the shelf and say, oh, I read that book. Did you like that book? Or they'll see a magazine and say, do you subscribe to that magazine? Or, and all those kind of conversations. There's a certain dance that you make to be socially acceptable. That, hi, how was your week? Did you have a nice weekend? Or those new shoes, whatever it is. But you pretty immediately move to, what are we going to talk about today? How are you? What will you share with me today? They will try to make it be a social encounter. It's not a social encounter. So you need to not bite that apple.
And the fifth and sixth points in this list are say anything in therapy and talk about therapy in therapy. And I think that both of those things are really good advice. I think that people oftentimes go to therapy and they think, oh, if I tell this person that I was really angry with my children, oh, they might call the Child Protective Services. So there are certain things that are taboo because of what the mandated reporter requirements are for people who do therapy. And I think that that can really be troublesome for letting the therapy go in a very naturalistic direction.
So you're talking about two different things, though. You're talking about therapy, you're talking about the law. And a good therapist, a well-trained therapist, will identify to the client fairly early on.
Right.
You need to understand that I always obey the law. So if you cause me to know that a specific child that I know of is in danger of harm or experiencing harm in a specific way, I must call the law, and I will. I'll do that. If you tell me this, I will follow through on it. So we can talk about feelings, desires, fears, anxieties, memories. But if you say to me, I went home last night and slapped my kid so hard I knocked his tooth out, I'm going to call the police.
And a tangential, what do you call that in geometry when it's
I didn't take
connected?
geometry.
Okay, anyway, a corollary to that is that
I don't know it was a geometric term, but I'll take that.
if you say you want to hurt yourself,
Yeah.
I'm going to call the police. But that doesn't mean
No,
that you can't
I'll
come.
qualify that. If you say I want to hurt myself, I'm going to find out if you have a plan,
Exactly,
if you
right,
have a
right.
method,
That's-
if you
yeah.
have a... Okay, we're going to pursue that further, but I'm not going to just run call the police and say, Mike said he's going to hurt himself.
Right.
Okay.
And I tell people in therapy, you can tell me that you don't want to be here anymore. I'm okay with hearing that. I can talk even about suicide and your desire to die.
Yeah.
And as long as you can tell me that you don't have a plan or that you don't have the means to carry out that plan, that doesn't trigger my need.
One of the most powerful reactions is, if you kill yourself, who's going to feed your dog?
Yeah. Which is
What's going to happen to your stamp collection?
not helpful.
Well, it causes them to think about something else.
Well, okay.
It is helpful.
Okay, I have and we may differ on this. I have I have difficulty, or I have a reservation against using guilt in that situation.
So I would argue with you that's not guilt.
Yeah. Okay.
That's grounding.
Okay. 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 All right.
Part of the grounding, I saw a severely suicidal client that stayed alive because she had an 11-year-old son that I kept saying, if your son finds you, what's that going to do to him in his life? And if your son misses you, he's going to grow up now without you. And what I know about 11-year-olds, he's going to blame himself. If
Right.
I'd been a better son, if
Yeah.
I had been better in school, if I'd been better behaved, if I'd done more chores, whatever it would be, he's going to take ownership of that. Do you want him carrying that?
Yeah.
Now, to me, that's not guilt.
Okay.
That's reality
No,
testing.
I can hear that, and I don't necessarily disagree with that logic. So, did you believe that there would, or did this client ever find a reason to want to continue to live that was intrinsically her own, or?
Yes, she's still alive today.
Okay.
It's been 20-something. You were in the car with me when she called one time.
Oh, yeah.
And you heard me say, put the gun down.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not going to shoot yourself.
Yeah.
And you pull off the side of the road and had a mini anxiety attack. I said, how do you do that? How do you know that? Because you were just starting the process of being a therapist on your own, and it frightened you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I can hear that and accept the logic of that. And as I've grown in my own, personally, my own development, but also in the development of being a therapist, what I have found is that there are some people who are just suicidal, and they're going to be suicidal no matter how good their
And
life
that's
gets.
what you tell people
Yeah.
whose family members or loved ones kill themselves. If they were truly going to do this, there's no way that it could be stopped.
Right.
And ethically, the law doesn't require you to save my life.
Right.
It just requires you to practice ethically. So you have to have had a safety contract with
Yeah.
me. You have to have made notations that you had one, that we discussed this and where we should, and that you had attempted to have an immediate risk assessment, and I wouldn't give you one. I wouldn't answer those questions in a way because I would know, well, they're going to send somebody out to stop me.
Right.
So if I manage to accomplish it, it's on me. As long as you behaved ethically, you should be protected.
Right. So, again, this is your second to last show,
Yeah.
and I will say again, that I really appreciate everything that you've done and contributed. We got one more show, and I'll probably be pretty emotional when we get to that show.
I know a number of good therapists.
And I might need to call someone. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. If you want to go on the internet and find us, you can find us at psychwithmike.com. That's where the podcast lives. You can find us on YouTube at Psych with Mike, and if you subscribe to the show there, we would really appreciate it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts at Psych with Mike, and if you leave us a review and a rating, that will help other people find the show, and we greatly appreciate that as well. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.